just to give you guys a little bit about me, my name's Annalisa Tarizzo. I grew up in the Chicagoland area, graduated from the University of Michigan in 2018, where I studied Italian and French. I had a really hard time figuring out what I wanted to do with my life in college, and I just had too many interests and I didn't know how to sort of combine them all to make sense in terms of figuring out my career trajectory. And so I had been always interested in environmental issues and climate change and had been involved in some things, but I didn't really realize until my senior year of college that this is what I wanted to dedicate my life to doing. So primarily working to combat climate change is sort of my core mission. And so when I was looking around for jobs after college, realized, I don't really have the traditional background of someone who would go into environmental work because I had studied languages. And I came across CAC AmeriCorps and was lucky enough to get a position with UT. Is anyone here currently serving with UT? Oh, nice. Okay, I see two hands. Awesome. Well, enjoy it. It goes too fast. Yeah, so I spent 2 years serving with UT, and that was sort of a really defining experience for me that really put me on the current career trajectory I'm on now. And I think is the real reason that I was able to get my current job working as a shareholder advocate with Green Century Capital Management, which I will explain what that means in a second. But to give you an idea of what my AmeriCorps experience was like, for my first term, I was the zero waste coordinator with UT Recycling, which no longer exists because it merged with the UT Office of Sustainability. And during that first year, I was, for the most part, doing really, really hands-on work with waste streams, working with trash, picking up compost at university buildings, working at the compost site, helping with zero waste game days. And I really got to see sort of one side of the sustainability work landscape, which is like really intense behavior change work, individual behavior, looking at how people are actually interacting with, in this case, the waste that they generate. In my second year, the UT Sustainability Office had gone through this restructuring, and Jay was kind enough to sort of let me decide what projects I wanted to work on for my second year. And so after having done that really, grassroots on the ground work my first year, I kind of wanted to see what it was like to take things from a little bit of a higher level and do some more like strategic planning. So I got to help bring back this old program that had sort of stopped called the Green Office Program. Got to work on some reporting of the university's sustainability activities. But the common thread between my 2 years was working on UT Zero Waste Commitment, which was basically trying to get the university to make a formal commitment to start reducing its waste and diverting its waste from landfill to recycling and composting. And so this is something that zero waste coordinators have been working on with Jay for a number of years. And I happened to be there at the time when it was time to start doing stakeholder engagement, time to start drafting a proposal and actually presenting it to leadership. So I got to go through this whole process of talking with departments at UT, figuring out what was working, what didn't, what gaps there were in our programming, to actually developing a proposal for what was possible for the university to do in this area, and then actually going to meetings with senior leadership and presenting that proposal and trying to convince them to make it happen and get the chancellor to sign on to it, which we luckily were able to make happen in January of my second term, which was really exciting. And I didn't realize at the time how closely that experience would mirror what I get to do now at Green Century every week. So a little bit about Green Century. We're an environmentally responsible mutual fund company. If you don't know what a mutual fund is, it's basically an a vehicle that people use to put their money into, say, for retirement or a child's education or some, a big purchase like buying a home or a car. And so you basically pool your money with a bunch of other people and it gets invested across a wide variety of companies so that you're sort of spreading out your risk across many companies. Instead of saying, I'm just going to invest all my money in Apple, but what happens if Apple goes under or something, then you lose everything. So that's sort of the idea of a mutual fund. And we say we have a sort of three-pronged approach to our investment strategy. The first prong is that we try to invest in sustainable companies. So we'll do this from both the negative and positive aspects. So on the negative side, we screen out entire industries that we think are either environmentally or socially destructive. So the big one for us is that we don't invest in any fossil fuel companies, no companies that extract, refine, process, transport, utilities that burn fossil fuels for electricity. We don't invest in any of them because we are not, we don't want the risk of what they're doing to the planet in our portfolios, essentially. And then we also screen out other industries like tobacco, alcohol, firearms, military weapons, that kind of thing. And then on the positive side, we try to invest in companies that have high sustainability ratings or achieve certain sustainability criteria. And this is where a term I'll probably end up saying a lot is ESG. So that stands for environmental, social, and governance. So we try to invest in companies with high ESG ratings to ensure that our portfolio is investing in companies that perform well among their peers in their industry. The second prong to our approach is shareholder advocacy, which is what I do, and I'll talk in more depth in a second. And then the third prong is our nonprofit ownership structure. So we were founded and continue to be owned by a group of environmental and public health nonprofits who, once we pay all our expenses and our staff, all of our remaining profits go back to them to fund their mostly legislative work on things like protecting pollinators and promoting renewable energy and different environmental issues. So what is shareholder advocacy? It's kind of a weird thing that I did not know existed or knew was a job until I actually started doing it. But it's basically when investors and companies use the power of their investments and their stock ownership in that company to push them to improve their behavior on a range of issues, most commonly on ESG issues. And so we do this, we're a primarily environmentally focused firm, and so we do this on a number of issues. I primarily work on plastic pollution, deforestation, a little bit on the right to repair, and then I have colleagues who work exclusively on emissions reduction targets. And so when doing this work, we can't just go to a company and say, hey, plastic pollution is a really big issue right now. Fish are dying. We need you to fix this because it's the right thing to do. Companies don't do things out of the goodness of their hearts usually. And so we have to frame everything that we do through this business risk lens. And so instead of saying, do this because you should, say, consumers are really paying attention to what companies are doing on the environment. So they're noticing when you're using a lot of unnecessary plastic. And if you don't start changing your practices, you might actually lose customers to your competitors who are making those positive changes. And so we have to use sort of that, use the risk of financial loss to spur change in this area. And so we do use a variety of tools to achieve our goals. And so I'll sort of go through the process that we use, which sort of falls on like a school year schedule for most companies. So over the summers, we will spend our time combing through our portfolios, looking to see which companies are maybe lagging on what issues, doing research into their current policies and practices, and trying to decide where they need to go to reach a level that we think they're doing the right thing, basically. And so then getting into the late summer and early fall, we start sending letters to these companies where we spell out the whole business case for why this company should act on this environmental issue because of the sort of financial risk it poses to them. And in that letter, we'll ask for a meeting so that we can ask them questions. For the most part, companies will respond to us, and so we'll be able to talk to folks on their corporate sustainability teams, people on their supply chain teams, and sort of get into the details of like, you know, how does this policy that you have actually work? Are there any gaps? You know, is the company actually taking this issue seriously, or are they just sort of brushing it off and maybe putting some fancy words on their website, but not actually doing anything behind the scenes? And so once we, you know, sometimes companies are doing the right thing, they're just not really talking about it publicly yet. And in that case, we can sort of let that, you know, continue on. In some cases, and in a lot of cases, companies aren't actually doing what we think they should be doing. And so then we can use this tool called a shareholder proposal to gain some leverage in our negotiation position. So when you invest a certain amount of stock in a company, you're able to file this document called a shareholder proposal, which is basically a formal request to a company to either make some sort of policy change or do some sort of risk assessment. And then once you file that proposal, it can get voted on by all of the shareholders in that company. So companies really do not like getting these shareholder proposals. It's kind of embarrassing for them to have investors telling them what to do, especially really small firms like Green Century. And so it becomes a point of leverage where we can go back to them and say, hey, we filed this proposal, but we're willing to take it back and withdraw it if you decide to make a commitment that we would like to see. So maybe it's a commitment to plastic reduction or a commitment to set greenhouse gas goals. And so every year we're able to convince about 20 companies to make those kinds of commitments through this process, which is really cool. And it's a really effective way to do advocacy work. Of course, not every company wants to come to this agreement with us, in which case it will go to a vote in front of shareholders, which is the ballot. The company ballot is called a proxy. So all of the big investors will vote their proxies, and the higher the vote percentage, the more leverage we have coming out of the annual meeting to go back to them and say, hey, 50% of your investors agree with us. So, what are you going to tell us now? Like, are you going to continue to sort of brush this off, or are you going to actually make some changes? And then all throughout that process, we can use media attention to sort of strategically put pressure on them from the outside. And so over the last year and a half, we've been able to get some pretty big companies to do some cool things. So we were able to get Target to commit to cutting their plastic use. We got JP Morgan to draft a new policy that will prevent deforestation within their financing of palm oil refiners, and some pretty high votes. So it's been a cool experience working here. But shareholder advocacy is a sort of very small niche role within the greater corporate sustainability landscape. And through my job, I work with people who have roles in sort of all kinds of sustainability aspects within the private sector. And this is really a growing field. There's a shortage of expertise among companies, among financial institutions, because basically every company in the country is trying to build up their sustainability programs because investors are asking for it. The public is keeping a closer eye on these things. So I think it's a really cool opportunity for all of you to consider, because it is, I think, a really interesting space. It's a growing space. And what I really like about it is that companies can be more nimble than government can. So even if like state legislatures or Congress is gridlocked and like we can't pass climate legislation, companies can still take action on their emissions. We can still push them to do things. And so it's a really cool space to be in, I think. And a lot of these corporate sustainability roles are not necessarily entry level. So having this AmeriCorps experience is really great going into applying for jobs at some of these organizations and others. So I think, yeah, it's a really cool opportunity. But I work with people who do corporate sustainability within companies, so who do like their internal goal setting and then like strategizing how to actually achieve those goals. Sometimes we work with sustainability consultants who are providing guidance to companies on their goals. There are a whole host of sustainability and nonprofits who help companies with their sustainability reporting, or who will verify targets like greenhouse gas targets to ensure that they're aligned with the Paris Agreement, all sorts of things. And then there's a whole world of sustainable finance that, there are people who do things like what I do, but then there are people who are doing ESG research to help portfolio managers determine which companies they should invest in. There are whole companies that just do research on other companies and develop those sort of ESG ratings that investors use. There are also companies who do that research so that they can make recommendations on how other investment firms should vote on shareholder proposals. So it's a really, really, like the breadth of career options is really, really deep. And so I think it's an awesome thing to consider. But I've also got, I'll hopefully be able to share these slides with you, but these are just some like resources that I wish I had when I was looking for jobs after AmeriCorps. Definitely want to share these links with you.
Annalisa, yeah. If you want to share it with me in our email, we could totally get it to everybody.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah,
that sounds good.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'll stop interrupting you and let you finish.
Oh, no, you're fine. You're fine. But yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions. I know I threw like a lot of information at you. But if you also don't have questions now, you can definitely email me. I'm always happy to talk.
I like to talk, so I have a question.
Go for it.
You, of course, the answer is no, you probably did not imagine yourself in this position as an AmeriCorps member. But if you could go back and tell yourself one thing, what would it be? No pressure.
Yeah, you're right. I definitely never imagined myself to be in this position now. And I think I would just tell myself that like you're on the right track. Like AmeriCorps is a really amazing experience, and obviously you get out what you put into it. And so I would encourage you all to really take advantage of this place that you're in your life, and try to make the most of it, because I think it can reap really great benefits.
That was great. If y'all have any other questions, feel free to put them in the chat. Thank you again for presenting. You're more than welcome to hang out with us. I think you did a great job. Folks, we are going to take a break from 2:30 to 2:45. So when you come back from the break, go ahead and slide into the breakout room so I don't have to interrupt the next presenter. You just pick the one you want. If you need to schedule, it's in the main room. So you can go ahead and hang out, or you can go ahead and take a break.
I just want to say I had never heard of this type of position either until you got it. And it led me to start asking questions about my own investments and things, because it's really ironic that in some cases people's 401ks and things are invested in industries that in some cases work directly against the work that they do in their day job, right? Like, you know, you might work for a big company who invests a lot in military or pharmaceuticals or fossil fuels and things like that, while you are simultaneously working on efforts to try to counterbalance that. So it actually led me to talking to my financial advisors about it. And when I started talking to them, they were actually kind of perplexed, because I feel like it's I don't know why, but it seems like, at least from that perspective, the environmental perspective, there was some confusion about it. But I've revisited this conversation again, and I'm trying to figure out, like, because at this point I've been working for like 15 plus years, and so it's like, man, you know, I want to make sure my money's in a place where it's not feeding the things that I'm trying to, you know, I don't want to feed. So. And gosh, you guys are always posting. You've had so many unique wins. I feel like I saw something about Mattel and some other like big companies, right? Like that are reducing their waste. And
yeah, we had a good win with Mattel and with Coca-Cola last year as well, getting them to set some goals on plastic reduction. Yeah.
Right. money talks, right? In some cases, it talks more than anything else. So, I mean, this is a really influential perspective that some may not have otherwise considered.
Yeah, it definitely does. And we sometimes will like talk with folks who are doing campaigning, like corporate campaigning from the NGO side. And, you know, the amount that me and my two other shareholder advocate colleagues are able to accomplish in 1 year is just astronomical compared to, you know, doing those outside pressure campaigns, because your position as an investor is really powerful. So it's a really cool, I don't know, it's just a really cool way to make an impact.
Yes.
Yeah.
Amethyst had something great to share. She said, just to share, we are carrying on the work of the zero waste commitment at UT. It is a big goal of our team this year to get some more policy commitments out of it.
Awesome. That's awesome, Amethyst. I'm excited about that.
And Adam asked, what year did you serve with CAC AmeriCorps?
Oh, I served from 2018 through 2020.
And you have lots of thank yous in the chat.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. This was really fun.
I want to add to what Amethyst said really fast. So I'm also with UT Sustainability. And yeah, thanks for the work that you did, that you like started, and we're really happy to like be working on right now. I want to ask, like, so sometimes I feel like it's kind of soul sucking, honestly, to like get to their level and just be like, yeah, so these are the reasons that you should do this. Like, we're gonna save you money, and that's the reason that you shouldn't like take all of this stuff to the landfill, you know, like instead of being like, it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Like, do you have any suggestions on, or like, I don't know, does it get better? Like, do you kind of start like thinking like them a little bit? And I don't know, do you have any like insight on that really?
Yeah, I think that's sort of the question that anybody working on these issues has all the time, because it is hard, and it's hard to, you know, work on problems that are so big, you know, you can't solve them by yourself. So for me, just like finding a community of people who are, you know, have the same values as you and have similar goals, like you find with your fellow AmeriCorps members, I think is really important, so that you can sort of commiserate. And you know, when you have bad days and you're discouraged, you can talk about it with someone who understands. So I think that's really important. I always find myself talking to my my friends who are in AmeriCorps with me about stuff like that. But it does get, I mean, I will say though, it does get better. I think the more that you learn, the more you feel like you have some control over the situation and know how to help. So
Sweet, thank you.
yeah.
We have about 2 more minutes. If anyone has any further questions.
Just a thought. A lot of times the folks that are at the top of organizations are fiscally responsible for those organizations. So a lot of times, you know, they're functioning in a capitalistic role where like being able to pay payroll and all those things are front and center, right? So they're competing against sustainability topics. So knowing how to make the value argument, even if the value argument you have to make is different than the value argument you would make for yourself, will yield you exceptional results more often than trying to make a uniform appeal to people's morality, or the morality how you might personally frame it. So being able to kind of step outside of your perception of morality and priorities, and kind of work with the priorities of within leadership. If you ever work for the government specifically, you'll find that there's often competition for like how much money goes to police and fire and stormwater and engineering. And so sometimes you have to find ways to tie your interests, say in stormwater, for example, to the interests of broader development or things like that, just to make the progress. It's a never-ending puzzle that shifts all the time.